Who am I? This question has pierced the heart of women since Eve left the garden. Today, women around the world allow untruths to fracture our identity. While lies threaten to destroy us, they also unite women in common suffering. Could this be a strategic key to unlocking truth for all women? Join us November 4th through the 6th at the Hephzibah House in Manhattan for an immersive multimedia art experience exploring the lies holding women captive and the truth which sets them free. For more details, visit ungallery.org. That's ungallery.org.
You are listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, a podcast that presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry. Here is your host.
Hello and welcome back to Our Urban Voices. I'm your host, Dr. Alphonse Javed. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Mark Strong, who is the lead pastor along with his wife, Marla, of Life Change Church located in the heart of inner city Portland, Oregon. He is also the author of Who Moved My Neighborhood, leading congregations through gentrification and economic change. Our topic today focuses on how churches can adapt to drastic changes in their neighborhood. Dr. Strong serves on the board of regents at George Fox Seminary, and his books include Church for the Fatherless and Divine Merger. He is also the founder of a ministry that addresses the needs of the fatherless epidemic affecting our world. He and his wife, Marla, have 4 children. So, Mark, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to our show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's so wonderful to talk to somebody who is speaking into 2 of my favorite topics. One is the issue of gentrification and the role of a pastor, how a pastor can help, and then the economical side of that. But then the second one, being a man or a father, that both topics are so important to me as a man and a father, and then also a pastor who loves inner cities and speaks on behalf of marginalized communities, not only here, overseas as well. So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
So before we get started, please tell us a little bit about your family. I think it's important for our audience to understand that you are a family man, that you have a family, not just an author and a pastor, somebody who is distant. Rather, you are a real person dealing with real family stuff. So please share with us a little bit about your family.
Great, Dr. Javed. I've been married to my wife, Marla, since 1988. So we've been married a little over 34 years. And we have 4 children. We have 2 boys and 2 girls. Well, they're actually 2 men and 2 women now. My son, oldest son is 31. My oldest daughter is 27, and I have one that's 23, and then the baby boy is 20 years old. So Micah, Michelle, Mackenzie, and Miles. So we named them all with the letter M. So my wife's name is Marla, my name is Mark. So we're all M. So when it's Christmas time and we give gifts to different family members, we just say from the M Strongs. And
right.
They know who it's coming from. So we just, been married for a little while and just still enjoying each other, still having fun, and still enjoy just the blessing of God putting us in each other's lives.
I'm sure it doesn't confuse anybody when they are talking about your family, right?
No,
which one?
Yeah.
For full disclosure, I had the same intention. So my name is Alphonse. My son's name is Arias. His younger brother is Asher. And I wanted to go with the same thing with my twin girls. So my Aris is 5, Asher is 3, and my twin daughters, they are a year and a half old. So a year and a half. So, but then my wife was just like, not my wife, actually, I think this was my in-laws. They thought that it's too much of like everybody.
Yeah.
And then my wife felt a little bit left out. Her middle name is Margaret, and her first name is Sarah. But S and M, those were the options. She asked like if we could figure out that for the girls. So we went with Z and S.
Okay.
So I totally understand. That's my point. So probably the listeners are sitting there. Are you going to move on from talking about this and get to the topic? So yes, we are getting to the topic. So, but family is important. So I think it's a good thing.
Yes, family is important. And family is so important. Family is, essential to who we are and what we do, because we know as we're, called the Lord to do his work, we also have that responsibility to be shepherds and good dads and loving husbands to our children, to our wives. That's our first mission field.
Amen. So Dr. Strong, from what I understand, your book, Who Moved My Neighborhood, is directly inspired from your experience growing up in and pastoring Life Change Church. To start off, can you tell us about the Neighborhood Change Life Change Church?
Yes.
Has experienced over the decades?
Yes. So when we started pastoring back in 1988 as well too. So my wife and I got married, and then 2 months later we were pastoring the church. And so North and Northeast Portland was pretty much back in the time what they would call the hood or the inner city. Over the last 34 years, the neighborhood has drastically changed. So in North and Northeast Portland, it was predominantly African-American community. There were some whites, some Hispanics, but the majority of the African-American population in Oregon lived in North and Northeast Portland. So what begins to happen around 1980, you start to, you have a population of probably about 22,387 African-Americans. And then it goes up in 1990. And then once it hits 2000, it starts dropping and it starts dropping and starts dropping. So 1980 was probably 28% of the population was African-American, Northeast Portland. By 2010, it had dropped to 15%. Now it's probably closer to 4%. And so the demographic change in terms of the African-American community has been horrific in terms of the numbers. Now, our church, we have a blended church. So we have different nationalities in our church. We're predominantly African-American, but we have whites and Hispanics and a few Asian people, in the church and as well too. But as far as that neighborhood goes, the change has totally changed the landscape in terms of the economics, in terms of the social places that people had to network with and gather and form relationships. It's a totally different place now. It's not even the same. It's not even the same area. I remember I was my office one day and I was on my computer. I was looking at a little clip on Yahoo, right? And it said the 10 hippest places to live in America. And so they start going through the list: 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. By the time they got to 1, they said the most hippest place to live for hipsters in America is Portland, Oregon. And they had a picture of Portland, a picture from a street corner in Portland that was showing where the hipsters like to gather. And so I was sitting at my desk and I said, man, that picture looks really familiar. And so I just turned my head and I looked out my window from my office, and the picture was taken right across the street from my office window. Wow. And so that just gives you an idea how the neighborhood has changed.
Wow.
around us.
Wow. Would you say that's what prompted all of this drastic change in your neighborhood? Or is it more to that?
Yeah, I think there's more to it. Part of the issues that a lot of inner cities face is just the whole economic disparity in terms of jobs and what people make and their buying power. So even though that community was predominantly African American, a lot of those were not homeowners. A lot of them were renters, and the ones that did own homes, once they passed away, then some of those homes were sold and so forth. So, you figure people were buying houses back in the 80s and 90s for maybe around 50,000, maybe 60,000. Whereas now those same houses, they sell for $600,000, $700,000 and upwards of $1 million. Right across the street from our church. So where our church is located now, our church used to be the biggest building on the block. So we should tell people, if you want to get the life change, just make a right, come up Williams Avenue. You can't miss it. We can't say that anymore, because to the right of us, there are 5, 6-story buildings. Right in front of us, there are 2 big buildings that were actually award-winning buildings that received awards. They were put in the New York Times in terms of the environmental things that they use to build a building and that kind of thing. And so our building is totally dwarfed. But across the street, just adjacent across the street, they built another 5-story building, and in that same building, they have apartments or condos that are selling for $1.7 million.
My,
Who can afford a building like that? Who can afford a condo for $1.7 million?
This reminds me, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you, but I want
No,
you to
that's
continue
fine.
this
Yeah.
conversation, and we're gonna be getting into the conversation of we're gonna have more conversation on this. But you know what it reminds me? I have a deep love for New York City, and anytime people ask me, when I was living, I just moved here last year
Okay.
to New Jersey, about 45 minutes away from Midtown Manhattan now. But one of the things I still love the city, just so you know, I love New York City, but yet I have to say this. If you look at the history of New York City, African Americans, those days rather, when people were brought here, right, in New York,
yes,
they will put them it was like around Midtown, right? First it started
yes,
because everything was downtown. People were there, rich people or white people or whatever you want to call them, the hipster of that day, let's call, right?
yes, yeah,
When they
yeah.
start moving in that, then they were pushed over there where the Central Park is right now. You know the Central Park story?
Yes, I don't know. I know where Central Park is. I've been there, but I don't know
Oh
the
my.
story though.
Oh, you gotta read this story, man. And maybe next book
Okay,
should add that, because
okay,
Poland is sharing the same story. So then these were the slums, these were the neighborhoods, these were the black neighborhoods then. And
okay.
then when the Central Park was put there, then they were pushed away even farther
Yeah,
up in Upper Manhattan, where Harlem is now. And now
okay.
Harlem is being pushed out. That's where you got the Bronx and the South Bronx, and then
Yes,
eventually out of the city. If you talk to um, things are changing also. It's not all this bad, just so you know. In the
right.
last few years, things have, I think, are moving in the right direction. So hopefully that will bring something. And this conversation is part of that, just so you know.
Yes,
And I think the more we talk about this, so hopefully the change will come. But you're right. Midtown Manhattan, where my previous church was, it's called Billionaire Row. Your story reminds me the story of Billionaire Row,
wow.
because who would afford Billionaire Row? I'm saying billionaire because literally the apartment next door to my church, upstairs, like the top one, I forgot the exact amount. It was like 20. It was like in somewhere there,
Yeah.
$1 million, 20 million, 30 million. I don't know what was it. It was
Wow.
like a lot of money.
Wow.
Now you don't get those kind of things, right? So think about what it would look like if somehow the conversation was with the African American community in your neighborhood when things were coming in. And I'm just trying to see your church there. And I'm also
Yes.
looking at the building because I had the same experience in New York, seeing those buildings right before my eyes. These buildings went up, right? Um,
Yes.
so I'm just thinking about those things and looking at how people are pushed out now. Even if you are the one who had the your church, I suppose, is owned by your church
Yes.
property. Okay,
Yes.
so that's a blessing. So I'm sure people are already reaching out to you too, that, hey, sell your property, we're going to give you a new church and we'll build a condo on top of you and all the other details.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
that's another trend in New York. Another friend of mine, he has his church over there, and I'm not going to name the church, otherwise people are going to know that church right away. And they have the same offer. So it's just that idea. Let me buy your property and build you a new church, and then we will have the top. You keep your church. This is
Right.
happening, but at the
Yes.
same time, that changes the look of your church, who you are. You are
Yes.
no longer the church you're supposed to be. Now you are this, I don't even know, artificial something.
Yes.
Nothing against those advancements. We should be walking with this somewhat same pace that the world is changing with. But at the same time, in the neighborhood changes the original calling for which you were planted, right? You were,
Right.
I'm sure. Anyways, I'm sorry. I'm just going. It's supposed
No.
to
No.
be
No. No.
interviewing you, and I'm just opening up my heart and sharing with you. At least it shows you that I do have concern and I do understand some of this, but not. Of course, I'm not going to pretend that because I'm not the part of this. Um, I'm not the recipient of this kick out policy, right?
Yes.
Let's kick people out of this neighborhood.
Yes.
Now, the $1 million question: how does a church address this change? In your book, you outline a 7-step framework for churches to heal. Walk us through that and take your
Oh,
time, please.
okay. So what I'd like to just say, just to kind of preface the process I'm going to talk about here in a second, is that the uh, building and developmental changes, the economic changes, those are all things that we see visibly. But what goes unnoticed and what is overlooked sometimes is the trauma of those changes, uh, the trauma that those changes causes in people in the community's lives. So there are terms like root shock that describe that when a community is involuntarily displaced, how that affects the life of that community, the culture, the interpersonal relationships of that community, the identity of that community, and it's a blow. I think in my book I talk about there was a fight between Muhammad Ali and Sonny Liston, and there was a blow they called the Phantom blow. And when Ali hit Liston and it knocked him out, it was so fast, so quick, nobody saw it coming, but it was enough to floor this prize fighter. And so when a community is hit with gentrification, it's a blow that is powerful and a blow that's impactful. In Psalms 130, in the 137th division of Psalm, verse 1-4, it talks about the Israelites who were in captivity in Babylon. And they said, by the rivers of Babylon, we sat and we wept when we remembered Zion. So Zion is their home. That's their place. That's where their culture was. That's where they worshiped Yahweh. That's where the temple was. They said, there on the poplars we hung our harps, for there our captors asked for us songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, sing us one of the songs of Zion. And they responded by saying, how can we sing the songs of the Lord in a foreign land? So here it is. You have these musicians who are trained to worship God. They're skilled in harps, they're playing the harp. They're skilled in singing. And they're asked in Babylon to sing the songs of Zion. And they respond, how can we do that? How can we sing those songs in a strange place? So literally their community heart, their home heart, their uh, 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 church heart, or temple heart, had been cut out of them to the place they say we can no longer do what we're supposed to do because we are in a strange place, in a strange land. So when we start talking about the process in terms how a church can move forward, there's a lot of discussion that kind of two sides of it. So what can we do about the gentrification? How can we affect policy? How can we do land development or land banking or those type of things? So there are the issues to address some of the economic and developmental shifts that are taking place. But then when we look at the people, when we look at the church, there's a process that has to happen where we look at it on a relational, humane type of way in terms of what people go through. It's a loss. It's a loss. It's a death of something that's valuable. It's a death of something that has been dear to your life, that you've grown up with, you live with, you moved about, your community, the person down the street, they know you, you're familiar with the businesses. Your church is by your house, and there's people from your neighborhood that go to your church. So all those things change. And so for us, I wasn't really getting this at first, and really this process just kind of unraveled, if I could be honest with you, just kind of unraveled through prayer and just, me just crying out to the Lord, God, what's going on? What can we do? How can we help our church and so forth? So there was just this 7-step process that we went through. But I know I've been talking quite a bit. Would you like me to share that now, or just do you have anything else you want to ask, or should I just jump into that?
Jump in, man. Go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead,
Okay.
please.
Okay. So the process, the process has 7 phases to it, and the first phase is called regular, and that's the process of when you remember your old neighborhood. This is important because what it does, it gives you a sense of satisfaction and a sense of, wow, what we had was important and what we had was valuable. Because when your old neighborhood is just wiped away, there's a sense of insignificance, a sense of non-importance, a sense of what we had and who we were was irrelevant. Right. But it's important to remember, how in the scripture, God's always telling the Israelites, remember. Paul says, remember. Why do you want to remember? Because what you had initially was important, and what you had initially was valuable. And so in the book, I talk about some ways that you can remember your old neighborhood. And then the second part of the phase is what we call recognition. And that's a gradual awareness of your neighborhood moving. So when this gentrification process starts, you might not catch on to it right away because the changes are real subtle. You may notice that one building is gone, and another building is coming. I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking one day. This was like before this thing was going on. He says to me, "Why are people painting their doors red and purple?" I mean, he said, "I've never seen red and purple doors in our community." But what was happening is different people were moving in that like red and purple doors, but it was a difference. And we were recognizing some things that were going on. And so you start to see these kind of shifts, but it hasn't really hit you that the boat is leaving from the dock. There's still enough of the regularity of what the neighborhood and what the community was that it's not too alarming. And then the third phase is this: you realize that your neighborhood has moved. It's like it's done. Like, when it's Thanksgiving time, or you take the thermometer and you stick it in the turkey, and it comes to a certain degree and says the turkey is done. Well, this is like sticking the fork in the turkey. Yeah. It's done. The changes have been made. And it's a shock. You say, my neighborhood is not what it is anymore. It's gone. It's no longer here. It's no longer what I've known over the years. This is a totally different place. And that's a hard thing to deal with. And I mean, that throws you into all type of uh, emotional whirlwinds and feelings, and uh, just trying to figure out what's happened, but knowing that what was no longer is. And then after the realization phase, there's reconstruction. And what happens there is there's the attempt to try to rebuild the removed neighborhood. Well, like you said on Billionaire Road, I mean, how are you going to go if they're selling apartments on Billionaire Road for $20 million? How are you going to reconstruct that neighborhood? There's no way. You don't have the finances to be able to do that, to
Yeah.
purchase property, to
Right.
make things the way they are. And so, and I mean, we've seen in Portland where people are like, let's do this, let's reconstruct this and reconstruct that. And so you go through that whole process of trying to make the neighborhood what it once was. And then here's the big one. Once you realize you can't reconstruct it, you go through a rage phase, and you suffer the anger over your community and your neighborhood being moved. I never forget Dr. Javed. One day I was driving to the church, and I was coming up Williams Avenue, and I'm looking at all these changes, and I'm just being honest. By the time I got to the church, I got out of my car, went to the office, said hi to everybody, closed my office door, and I put my head on my table in my office, and I took my hand and I slammed my hand on the table, and I said, God, what in the world has happened? What is going on? And I felt all this rage coming out of me. I hadn't realized that I was boiling like that. I didn't realize that I was angry over all those changes. And so I was upset. I was mad. And what I did that day was I was able to pour that anger out to God, and also realize that I was upset about what had taken place, even though I hadn't really, cognitively wrapped my mind around that. Emotionally, I had that anger seething inside of me. And you're going to go through that. People in our churches, our church, they go through it. There was in most inner cities across America back in the 80s and 90s, they had the crack cocaine epidemic, and neighborhoods were being just devastated by crack. People losing fathers and mothers and nieces and nephews and uncles and brothers and sisters. It was just absolutely terrible. So across the street from the church, they did a new development. They have bottom level is all business. Like they have a pizza shop, ice cream shop. They have a bar. They have a barber shop, and just some other business. Then they have the apartments on top. Well, it was a hot summer day, and some ladies from our church, they went across the street to buy an ice cream. So we must have had something going on at the church, because I was outside, and about 4 of them went across the street to get ice cream. They came back, and they were upset, and they were like, Pastor, what's going on? I'm like, hey, you guys calm down a minute. What's going on here? I mean, they were like fire breathing dragons on me, and so I had to try to calm them down to see what was going on. But so once they got around, after they got through venting, they got around and they said, listen, they have an ice cream over there called chocolate crack. It's called chocolate crack. And when they saw that, it just outraged them. They're like, how can these people, because first of all, they look at them as strangers. How can these people come to our community and they don't even know what's happening? And now they name an ice cream called chocolate crack. There's no humor in that whatsoever. So we talked a little bit, we prayed about it. And I said, just go back over there and talk to the lady. Don't bawl her out. Just talk to her, explain to her. So they went back over, they talked to her about how crack had devastated the community before. This is not humorous and so forth. And then they renamed that ice cream. They took that name off the menu, but just in terms of different things that can kind of fuel the rage. So the name of the ice cream was, okay, that was totally insensitive. But what that did was just threw a log and fueled the fire on the greater furnace that was burning inside the heart because of the rage. So a church has to work. You have to work through that. Now, in all situations, it may not be like that, but you're going to find some rage someplace and so forth. And then the next phase is called reconciliation. And that's when you have to come to terms with your neighborhood. My neighborhood is moved. How do you come to terms with that? Because even if your neighborhood is moved, as followers of Jesus Christ, we still must be missional.
Amen.
Whether it's black, white, blue, brown, orange, or turquoise people, we still have to be missional. That's the call of Jesus. Go in the world, preach the gospel to all creatures, right? To everybody, all nations. And you cannot do that if you're angry. You cannot do that if you're mad at the people that have moved into your neighborhood. I mean, you can be upset about the way some things are happening, but you still have to have a love for people. But you have to work that. So you have to come to a place where you can reconcile with the changes that happen. And so that day I went to my office and I slammed my hand on the desk, and I was so upset. The Lord spoke to me. It wasn't like an audible voice. I didn't see a vision from heaven, but the Lord just put a picture in my mind. I saw a picture of a chessboard, and I just saw these pieces, on the chessboard, and I, you make different moves to try to get that king, to put that king in checkmate. And I just felt the Lord speak my heart and said, Mark, just what's happened here. You need to understand I am still sovereign. I'm still sovereign. And so part of what's helped me and helped our church, and I've shifted our church to come to some place of reconciliation, is to understand that even though what's happened we don't like, even though there's injustice in it in many, many ways, God is still sovereign, and God is still in control, and God still has a plan for his church. And then the last phase is this, what I call revamp. And that is, you got to determine how to navigate your church. Determine how to position your church to navigate your new neighborhood. That is, if God calls you to stay there.
So this is really beautiful, like step by step. It's almost like when somebody passes away, or and you lead them through that process step by step, right? And if somebody's missing, you have we say that you can't skip a step. You gotta go through the step. As I'm hearing you, I can see that. Why would you, as a pastor, introduce that step-by-step approach to help churches engage in this kind of conversation and help their congregation to experience healing? But toward the end, you did talk about the last part is the position to navigate, right?
Yes.
That means new people are there, and probably your congregation is booted out as far as their indigenous location is concerned, where they were born, probably where their aunts and uncles lives and all that. Now nobody's there, so they are not there. So here's a question: if all of a church's congregation lives outside of its neighborhood, in your case, your neighborhood, should the church move? Why or why not?
Yeah, I think that's a question that each church has to answer individually. And I think I wrote about this in the book as well too, that a church has to go through a process of discernment to determine what the Lord's will is.
Okay.
So for us, the majority of our community, they moved eastward. So they call that place now the Numbers. So the community has been dispersed all over Oregon and out the outlying cities, but the majority have moved eastward. And so we had, like you said earlier about the other churches, people wanted to buy the church. I mean, we get offers for 8 figures to buy our church building regularly. I mean, we paid $350,000 for the building. Now it's worth 8 figures. So we get those offers regularly. And so we pray, we say, okay, God, what do you want us to do? What are we supposed to do? Do we sell the building and do we move out? What is your mind? What is your heart? So, through prayer, through counseling, talk with people and so forth, we felt that God was saying, not going to say we're never going to sell that building, but we just felt that God had something else he wanted to do, but our heart was burdened. We had a burden for where the majority of the community had moved out to. So miraculously, what God did for us, I mean, it was just a miracle. I don't have time to tell that whole story, but God actually gave us another building out in the numbers in East Portland, where the people have moved out to. And so we were able to start another congregation out there for the people who have been displaced. And so I think it's a church has to figure out how God is leading it. So for some, it may be, we sell the building and we move to where the people have moved. For others, it may be no, we stay here and we plow the ground, and we know God's called us to this place. And so we're going to determine how we can best minister and serve this area where we're at. And for others, it might be a both and. We stay here and we start something different, or it could be a merger. Well, there's another church out here. We might be able to take our resources and to be able to merge with this church as well, merge with this church and further the mission of Jesus Christ. So I think there's options that are there. They're hard choices. They're difficult choices to make. They're challenging choices to make. But God is wise. He's full of wisdom, and he knows what is the best path for us to take. And he's faithful to show us that.
Yeah. As you were talking, Dr. Strong, I'm thinking about, because at heart, yes, I'm a senior pastor of a church here, but at heart, I'm still a missionary, because that's how my journey started. So I'm thinking, as you're talking, I'm thinking about calling. It depends on whether the congregation is called to a place, or a church is called to a place or people, right? So then you can make a not even spiritual, but educated decision that, hey, when we planted our church, our calling was to the people, because we saw that this is where the Lord wants us to serve this community, that whatever that community was. But over the period of time, if the community changes, then means if that community that you were called to is moving out, then you go with where the community goes. Therefore, the text you brought up earlier, one of the ways we can do the exposition is to look at that. They're longing for what they had, and that means that they were attached to the place, which is true. That's the whole idea of Israel. The land is the main point, right? So their identity is attached to the land, whereas God is telling them, wherever I go, you come, or wherever you go, I'm with you. That's where Joshua was sent, and God told him the same thing. I will be with you. Go ahead, right? At that time, there was no Israel, but there was calling to the people, not the place. But the place was promised as a part of that calling to the people. So I think all of this, you're right. It has to be a local congregation decision based on what brought them to that place. And then I'm also thinking, as you're talking, and I'm thinking in my mind, being missional, perhaps over the period of time, and you probably know that too. For me, the Lord has changed my calling over the period of time. Of course, my calling from day one was to follow Jesus, right? Live a holy life and all the other things. So to ministry, it changed over the period of time. I started with a youth pastor, as a pastor, right? And then I went to be missionary pastor, missions pastor, then senior pastor. But pastor is still there. Shepherding is still there. And I think all of this is, I'm just you gave me a lot of things to think about, and I'm hoping the listeners are able to hear all of this, and they are able to interpret some of this in their own context. And I think you already said this, and I just want to go back to this one question. You said Life Change Church made a choice to open a new location based on, right, this decision that, Lord is providing or giving us a place there in that community where most of your congregation moved, or at least your original people moved. So God did that. But would you mind just briefly telling us what factors went, other than that, what factors went into the decision for choosing the new location's neighborhood? But if this decision was solely on like, hey, Lord, what do you want me to do? Hey, here, I give you place, go open. That's fine too. That answer is perfectly legitimate answer. But is there anything else?
Yeah. So part like at the end of the book, I talk about like, mapping your future and just how you navigate. And so one of the questions that you have to answer for that is like a vision question or a mission question. What's our mission? What's our vision? And so when that decision was just primarily and just basic. I think the rudimentary foundational thing is this: we know we are called to make disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ. We know that we're called to our city. We have a burden and a passion from God to reach people, and so that passion and that burden, the call to reach people, cannot be. We cannot allow that to be inhibited by the physical location of a building. A building can help to serve your mission, but a building cannot be used to limit the mission. And
That's
so
excellent. Please repeat that again one more time.
okay, a building can be used to serve your mission, but a building cannot be used to limit your
Right.
mission.
That's right, brother.
And so we had to think outside of that wineskin. The parable of the wineskin. No one wants new wine because they say the old is better. You can't put the new wine into the old wineskin because it will burst it. So we had to think outside that. So what can we do? It's expensive. Buildings are expensive.
Sure.
Mission is expensive. A friend of mine always says this. He says, "How do you spell vision?" Well, the common answer would be VISION. He says the way you spell vision is MONEY. It takes.
Let me put that on for my fall business meeting.
Yeah.
No, I'm not even kidding. This is good.
Yeah. So vision always takes money. It always takes money, and so we had the burden. We know we had the call from God. We knew that people had moved out into the neighborhood. We saw the need that was there. We saw the need that was in that area. And so we were compelled to do something. And then, Dr. Java, I want to say this, is that when we made that move, our church does not have tons of money. We do not have millions of dollars sitting around in a bank account. We don't have it. When this building came open, we did not have money to buy it, but we felt it was something that God wanted us to do. So we said, let's make an offer. I got to make this story real quick here. So we called the realtor of the building. We talked to him, and he said, "Okay, I'm gonna let you talk to the owners tomorrow. We'll set up a conversation." And so the owners came on the phone, and because what they do is they have shopping centers all over Washington, Oregon, Utah, California. So they're a multi-billion-dollar company, and so they just happen to have this piece of property here that they were trying to sell and get rid of. So they said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, we have a heart to want to help the community. We want to help families. We want to help young people." And they're like, "That sounds really, really good. We really appreciate this vision that you have. We think this would be a worthwhile thing for the property." So then they said to me, they go, "Okay, well, how are you going to pay for it?" They said, "Do you have are you going to pay cash for it?" I said, "No." They said, "Are you pre-approved for it?" "No." Well, how do you expect to do this? I'm like, "Okay, Lord, help us to answer this question." I said, "Well, we did a similar thing like this with our other building, and we just figured that, we'll be able to get it worked out." They said, "Okay, let us think about it, and we'll call you back tomorrow." So they thought about it. They called us back tomorrow. They said, "Normally, we don't do anything like this. What you're asking us to do is totally non-conventional. But we like what you're trying to do, so we're going to give you a shot at it." So to make a long story short, God allowed us to tie that building up, not with financial currency, but just with sincerity and with vision and with faith. We were able to get an agreement and to start working toward the building.
Wow.
We were rejected by bank after bank after bank after bank after bank. Nobody would loan us the money. So this one lady gave me a number to call this one guy. I call him, and he goes, "Okay, tell me the house you're trying to buy." I said, "Sir, we're not trying to buy a house. We're trying to buy a supermarket. A couple acres of land. We're not trying to buy a house. We're trying to buy this complex." And he goes, "Well, I can't help you. Call this place." And so I'm thinking, "Oh, thanks for that tip." So I call the number he calls me, and this lady answers the phone. She's a banker at this particular bank. And I tell her our scenario, and she goes, she said, "Who told you to call me?" And I said, "Such and such." And she says, "He told you to call the right place." She said, "Let me come out and look at your existing building, and then look at the other building." So she comes out, she looks at our existing building, and then she looks at the other building, and she's not saying nothing. And so when she gets ready to leave, I said, "Well, what do you think?" And she turns to me, and she looks at me, she says, "This is God. This is God." And we just saw the Lord just give us. We had to raise, about $400,000 in a matter of a couple months during the summertime. Our church has never raised that kind of money. God gave us grace. God gave us favor to raise that money. And I got to tell you this story right here. So, at the last day when we were supposed to go and sign for that property, I got a call from the bank. They said, "We will need another $100,000 to be able to close this deal." I said, "Well, we raised all the other money, which you said to do." They said, "Well, no, we need another $100,000, or if you can find someone who has $7 million worth of property that we can put a collateral, we can do it." I said, "Well, how long do we have to do this?" I said, "How long do we have to be able to get this money?" And she said, "Well, you have to about 2:00 today." Where in the world we get $100,000 from in a matter of hours? Complicating the matter was, I had a funeral to do of a young man who died from a brain aneurysm. So I get this call from the bank. I have to go and do a hard, difficult funeral in 15 minutes. I'm like, "Lord, what's going on?" And so when we were trying to raise the $400,000, there was a gentleman who I just asked him for $5,000. He said, "No, I can't help you." He said, "Only come back to me if you really, 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 really need the money." And so a few of us got together. We were praying, and his words came back to me. We really, really need the money. So I called him back. I said, "Sir, we really, really, really need the money." He said, "Let me check with my wife." He checked with his wife. They gave us a check for $100,000.
Wow.
And then we were short another $20,000. My dad, who is never in my office, he was in my office and he saw me going back and forth. And he says, "What's wrong?" He says, "What's going on?" He says, "Here, your uncle's on the phone." And I'm thinking, "Dad, we're just told I got to raise another $20,000 here in about 45 minutes. I don't know where we're going to be able to get that from." And your dad's your dad. He's like, he's not saying pastor or doctor. He's like, "Boy, come and get this phone." So so I'm like, okay, I'll get the phone. So I take the phone, and it's my uncle. And he says, "What's going on?" He said, "Your dad said you got some problems." He said, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, I got to have about $20,000 in about 45 minutes. My uncle says, "Let me talk to my wife." And so my uncle doesn't even go to our church. He talks to my aunt. They come back, they give us the $20,000, and we were able to get that building.
Wow.
And the city, the other miracle was the city. They said, "Show us the plans, and we promise you, we'll help you get your plans approved in a couple of weeks."
Wow.
And I mean, they never do that. That never happens. And we showed them our plans. In a few weeks, they had approved them. Our contractor that did the remodeling, he said, "You know what? You can pay for the subs, but I'm not going to charge you my contractor fee." So that's how God gave us our second building.
Wow,
for that
man.
area out there.
You see, that's the encouragement. I was actually gonna. My next question was actually, hey, what encouragement can you give to the pastors or a congregation in churches through these changes? I think right there, the whole story is an encouragement that when you walk by faith, not by sight, and when you go through those steps and you bring that before the Lord, and the Lord blesses you. And I totally see that your vision was big, but it needed a lot of money, but God provided.
Yes.
any local pastor. I mean, I have to deal with that on day-to-day basis when
Yes.
money gets in the vision, in the way of the vision, and I'm like, Lord, what we're supposed to do now? And I mean,
Yes.
I'm encouraged what you just told us.
Wonderful.
This is wonderful, brother. And I
Yes.
think Lord is going to continue to bless your ministry and your congregations, both churches, and this is really amazing. Let me ask. I'm going to try to wrap this up.
Okay.
If the listeners want to get in touch with you or find your book, what are the easiest ways?
The best way to get the book is just to go to Amazon and either put Dr. Mark E. Strong in, or just type in who moved my neighborhood, and the book will come up and you can purchase on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to get in touch with me, the best way probably is like on my Instagram, which is at Dr. Mark E. Strong. So Mark, letter E, Strong.
Mm-hmm.
And you can message me there, and I can get back to you, or however. So,
and that will also be included in the episode's descriptions. So we talk about really awesome, but at times a little bit depressing situation, because it relates to community. It's real life, real people being kicked out of their own communities and all the other things. But then yet God is sovereign, right?
yes,
As
he
you
is.
said
Yes, he
earlier.
is.
But I want to close with a joke to lighten the
Okay.
mood. So
Okay.
give me a good joke.
Okay, yeah, I know. I'm always telling jokes about my kids. Like, oh gosh, that's so bad. It's just so bad. But here's one. Okay, a good friend of mine used to be a milk drinker, and he used to drink a lot of milk. But what happened to him was he started to get lactose intolerant, but he still liked milk. So he started drinking large amounts of almond milk. He would drink almond milk in the morning, almond milk in the afternoon, almond milk in the evening. He drank so much almond milk that it drove him nuts.
Very good. You see, I can get that joke. Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
So my jokes are bad. My kids
No. This is good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell that to my son.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell him, and I think he will appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show again.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It's just been very enjoyable.
That was Dr. Mark Strong from Life Change Church in Portland, Oregon. And thank you to all our listeners. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. If you appreciate this podcast, please be sure to subscribe to the show and leave an honest review wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you think this podcast would be beneficial or helpful to someone you know, please share or pass it along. Tune in next time for more honest discussions from diverse voices.
You've been listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, which presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry. Please check back for new episodes every week.
Did you know that the Our Urban Voices podcast is an outreach ministry of the Heart for Muslims Conference? Our vision is to promote love for Muslims and eliminate the fear of Islam. Join us this year on Saturday, November 5th at Trinity Baptist Church in Manhattan, New York. We will be focusing on the power of proximity, how your location, culture, and shared experiences can bring Christ to Muslims. Hear from Muslim ministry practitioners and connect with like-minded Christians. Find all the details at heartformuslims.com.